Hello and welcome to today's session of Hypnotherapy Unleashed. Today I cannot wait to share with you one of my favourite tools for being able to reduce, if not eliminate, anxiety as and when it comes up. So when we think about something like anxiety or depression, it's very much stated as something that we imagine to be dialogue. Not dialogue, digital. Either you've got anxiety or you've got depression or you haven't. But anyone who's ever had a panic attack or anyone who knows anything about suffering from depression or anxiety knows that very often it can be a bit of a sliding scale. It's an analog feature. Some days you might have zero anxiety, some days you might have full-blown panic attacks, but very often, 9 times out of 10, you might find yourself just sliding along the scale. Now, one of my favourite people in the world is an author called Peter Drucker who wrote a book called Managing Oneself. And in it, he said something that was so important that I think applies to almost every aspect of day-to-day life, which is what gets measured gets managed. So very often when we're thinking about anxiety, something that we think about in that moment is just, I feel anxious. Which is true, and it's a natural thing to think that, but it doesn't help in regards to being able to reduce that. So what I want to share with you is something that I found working with over 300 people over the last 6 years to really significantly reduce those feelings of anxiety in that moment. Now, this isn't necessarily a long-term solution, but just for in those moments, if we find ourselves feeling in a particular way, maybe being overcome with negative emotions, I know this to be incredibly powerful. There are, however, 2 things that you need to do beforehand for this to be effective, and I want to share those with you at the end. So on with the technique. So the first thing that we want to do whenever we're feeling those negative feelings is actually register it on a scale of 1 to 10. So let's say 10 in this moment is a full-blown panic attack and 0 is what anxiety? Maybe I've got a really tranquil mind in this moment. The most important thing we want to do is to be able to rate ourselves on that scale as to where we would be. So hypothetically, we might be feeling really, really anxious watching this video at the moment, in which case we might give ourselves an 8 out of 10. Now, the key thing of this exercise I'm going to share with you is to be able to get that down to a 0. So there's a few things that we're going to want to do. First of all, we want to get the 3 middle fingers on our right hand, and we want to say, not sing, the words "let it go" as we tap in a few places in our body. Now, I'm going to tell you now, a few people have some theories as to why this works. Some people believe it's because we're following principles that are based off of Chinese medicine. The truth is, I don't know why it works. But really, I don't think either of us really care as to why it works. What I love about this technique is that it works. So if you follow me, we're just going to get the 3 middle fingers on our right hand, and we're going to tap in a few different places in our body, around about 6 to 10 times in each of these places. Now, every time we go to a new location, we're going to say out loud, and I say, not sing, the words "let it go." So I'm sorry if you're a Frozen fan, we're only just going to say these words, okay? So we're going to take the first spot here, we're just going to tap in the middle, and we're going to say, "Let it go." Perfect. And now we're going to do the right side of our right eye here. Right temple, let it go. That's great. Now we're going to do underneath the eye. Now, before you start tapping, if you feel the bone underneath your eye there, you might feel a small little V section, a small almost little gap in that bone. And that's really where we want to be tapping. And again, we'll say, "let it go." And then after that, we're going to do the right side of the collarbone, slightly off center there. We're going to say, "let it go." Perfect. That's the middle of the chest then, and let it go. Now what we're going to do is we're going to grab the right wrist with the left hand. And I'll give you a moment to do that, because normally when I say that to people don't know which wrist to go for, but we're going to do the right wrist with the left hand there. And we're going to take a nice big deep breath in. And as we exhale, we're going to say, "peace." Now after you've done that, wherever you were to begin with, if you're an 8, you want to go in and just double check where that feels. Now you might find that it's gone from an 8 down to a 6. It might have gone from an 8 down to a 4. But wherever it is that we've gone to, we'll go through that again. Now, that version there was just a test run. You had to follow me around manually and do that. But let's just do that again. So we're going to say, "let it go." That's great. Right side of the eye, let it go. It's perfect. Underneath the eye, let it go. That's perfect. Right side of the collarbone, let it go. Lovely. Middle of the chest, let it go. Lovely. Grab the right wrist with the left hand. Big breath in. And say, "peace." And then we check in again, see where we are. Now, you might not go down from something like 8 to 0, but you will notice that it goes down just slightly. Now, wherever we go down to, so if it's an 8 down to a 6, there's a general rule that I remember my mentor telling me, which is say you tap out or you pass out. So basically we just keep doing this again until we get down to 0. Now on with the reason why this might not work for you. I found there's 2 reasons, and you could measure it like clockwork as to if it's going to work or not. One, for this to work, you really have to be hydrated. So I've seen it where people have started to do that. They'll go, they're an 8, they'll do the whole thing, and they'll say, maybe I'm a 7.5. Actually, I don't know if I noticed a difference. 99 times out of 100, they're normally dehydrated. So what we want to do is we want to drink some water, give it around about 10 to 15 minutes and try it again. If anything, this technique also makes you stay on top of your hydration, which is just so important for your health and optimization generally. But another reason that I found that's really quite interesting is sometimes if you do this standing next to, I don't know, a Wi-Fi router or a place where maybe you're just surrounded by sort of electromagnetic fields, like something that comes from a Wi-Fi router, or you're surrounded by lots of phones, sometimes just going to another room and doing it there can completely shift the perspective. So I've had it where times where, someone will come to my practice and we'll go through it and they're hydrating, doesn't work, and yet we go outside and we go into the hall and do it, it completely shifts. So go through that a few times. Now, what's really, really interesting is when you get down to 0, and you do this enough times, you'll absolutely get there. I've seen people who can't remember the last time they were at a 0. The lowest they can remember being was maybe a 2 out of 10, all the way down there for probably maybe 3 years or something like that. But if you keep doing that, peace. This technique isn't just a technique where we want to get it down. Really, we want to squeeze the last bit of the juice out of that lemon. So we're going to do something that would seem counterintuitive, which means that when we get down to a 0, let's say you start at an 8, see if you can get yourself back up to an 8. And you'll find that naturally a lot of that tension, a lot of that stress that you're holding on to, it just seems to have gone. And you might find yourself being able to go up to a 2 or a 3. And if you can get to that 2 or a 3, you probably know what's coming next. You just go through the same pattern again. And when you get down to a 0, you're going to find it harder and harder to get up to that place of stress. So don't just take my words for it. Remember, with this channel, we don't want to be doing the whole pleasing a therapist game. We want to become practical scientists in our own life. So really go through this and just see what happens when you're hydrated, when you're in a room that's not surrounded perhaps by heavy Wi-Fi, and just watch those numbers go down. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, please do share it with a friend or family or anyone that you know who you think could benefit from having a tool that really, in as quickly as 40 seconds, can make a difference to their well-being. And of course, please feel free to, subscribe, like, and share the following. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.